Leave this video understanding water-cooled recovery a little bit better in my 10 plus years of things that I've come across as I've done this. Hey, how you doing? I'm Holden Schamberger with Chiller Academy and HVAC Time. I specialize in chiller systems. Let's talk about those today. So one of the things we're going to get out of the way right up front, flow water, please. It is best to flow water, especially if you're not comfortable and you're not experienced with doing this particular process. There are ways and methods where it's not as big of a deal once you get comfortable and experienced and you know how to do those things. In the meantime, don't take any risks. Flow water. If you just make it a habit to flow water no matter what, you don't have to worry about something happening later on, which is my recommendation. Even knowing some of the other practices that technically on paper means you shouldn't have anything to worry about, I'm still flowing water. Even just from a heat transfer perspective, that extra movement in the system through the water side will improve my overall recovery. Highly recommend, just first things first, get water moving in the chiller. Protect the tubes. Now, the vast majority of the water cooled you're going to be recovering are going to be a flooded style. They're not going to be a DX style. I've done videos on the different types of evaporators, but ultimately the refrigerant is on the shell side of the barrel, and there's usually some form of a recovery port and charging port. Some of them may stick out on the evaporator and panel side. Others you'll have to get to on the back side underneath the condenser. So you'll just have to locate where yours is. A lot of the time there'll be a 1-inch port just sticking out with some kind of isolation valve. You can put any kind of reducers and step downs you need to get to whatever size hoses you're operating with. But that's going to be your main point of connection throughout this entire process. That valve will really simplify your life and make this very efficient and effective. Now, if you're doing mostly smaller chillers, and let's say less than 2,000 tons, I think is reasonable, but then you probably be fine with just a portable pump setup. You don't really have to go to the extent of purchasing an industrial setup. So the two recommendations I have there, and definitely one a bit more than the other, is one, a G5 Twin by Appion. Sounds kind of weird to say, but genuinely, if you get comfortable with push-pull especially, you can do a lot with that machine. Same thing with the Navic NRDC 4M. You can do a lot with that, especially in a push-pull state. I don't have a preferred industrial pump. There's a few good ones out there. If you're getting into those larger tonnages and you're seeing thousands of pounds of refrigerant in a given system, then yeah, you probably want to take the time to invest in those larger recoveries. It's just going to make the process a lot easier, a lot faster. Just to give you some parameters on how I would split that if you're just really not sure. So one of the first methods you should really get your head around is a push-pull. So with a push-pull, you're going to come out of that charging port into your liquid port of your recovery cylinder. And then you're going to come out of that vapor port of that recovery cylinder and into your recovery machine, and then out of your recovery machine into the top of the evaporator barrel. The vast majority of your water cooled, most of the refrigerant after shutdown is going to get pushed into the evaporator. The bulk of your charge, if not the entire charge, short of vapor, the bulk of your liquid charge especially, will be in the evaporator. So our cycle of recovery, we're pulling vapors off of the recovery cylinder, which is keeping our pressures down, our temperatures down, but we're also, that's allowing a low pressure point for all the liquid refrigerant in the chiller to flow into our tank. And by pulling the vapors off the top of the tank, we're then pushing them back into the chiller, which is keeping the pressure up in the chiller as well. One of the great things about this method is the chiller itself should never go into a freezing condition in saturation, so our saturation should never get that low while we still have liquid in the chiller, and that's really the most critical part. We don't want our saturation to be in a freezing temperature if there's still liquid refrigerant. So you should have a scale on your tank where you're monitoring that weight and fill it up to the normal 80%. That way you don't risk overfilling, or if you need to transport it at some point, like you've got those options still on the table. Just play it safe, okay? Especially if you're not used to doing this at this scale, play it safe, please. Now, the other method is your direct recovery, where you're just going straight from chiller to recovery machine, out of recovery machine into the tank. Even with a push-pull, you're still going to have direct recovery when you get to the vapor side of it. So once you've gotten all the liquid out of the system and it's just strictly vapor, then like that's it. And you'll know because the last tank you're working on, as you're doing the push pull, you'll see the weight of the scale just up, 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 and then just dead stop. It'll slow down some just before it actually comes to a stop, but then it's just going to stop. And that your recovery machine's still pumping, still doing its thing, but the actual tank weight is not increasing anymore. At that point, whatever liquid you're going to get out, you've got it. And so then you transition to a direct recovery, and that's just like everything else you've ever done recovery on in your career. One of the things you need to be aware of is a subcooler. A subcooler would be really handy, especially if you have a lot of vapor you need to pull down, and putting that in the between your recovery machine and your recovery cylinder. So that's one thing great about the Navic pump is it's got an incredible built-in subcooler. So it's actually got a mode where you can bypass that subcooler or go through the subcooler. So if I'm in a push-pull, they actually call it push-pull mode. But if I'm in a push-pull, then I'm bypassing that subcooler so that I get higher volume. I don't need to have that extra restriction. But whenever I switch over to my vapor, my direct recovery, then I'm putting it in this normal recovery mode, which utilizes the subcooler and keeps my tank temperatures down. That really just makes sure that my entire process is smooth, efficient, and effective. And if you're really, really new to all of this, get the larger tanks. Okay, don't use 30-pound, 50-pound tanks, and even depending on the size of your chiller. If you're new to this, you're probably not seeing them that big. They may be 400 or 500 tons in your early stages of this. So you'll probably be fine at that point with the 125-pound tanks. You can pick those up at a place like United Refrigeration, or there should be some kind of refrigerant like distributor around you. A-Gas with Rapid Recovery is one, or Summit Refrigerants is another one that's near me here in the Texas region. You can get the larger cylinders through them, and so you've got 120, 120s, 125s. You've got 240s, and you've got 1,000-pound drums. Those are the three main larger sizes that we'll use. So it really kind of depends on just the size of the system. And accessibility. 1,000-pound drum on a 1,500, 2,000-pound charge machine would be great if you can get it there. So some of it does come down to how much access do you have in the process. An additional side note, if you're fairly new to doing these kind of recoveries, make sure that even if you're using 1/4-inch hoses to do this, I do recommend investing in a much larger set and go to at least a 3/8 at least to do these. But if 1/4-inch is what you have, just make sure that you don't have any restrictions in your hoses. One, you've got a quality set of 1/4-inch. Those will have a larger internal bore diameter than some of the cheaper ones. Also, make sure that your core depressors are pulled from the system. You shouldn't have any Schrader cores to deal with because we're going to be dealing with service valves, and vast majority of them aren't going to have any kind of Schrader in them. But a core depressor becomes one, you don't need it. Two, it becomes a major restriction because you've got this chunk of metal in your hose that's not only reducing the hose's actual diameter so that it, holding itself into the grommet, but then the depressor bar just becomes something else the refrigerant has to force itself past. And, the whatever turbulence it creates, it just slows everything down. pull those out of the way. That'll get you much higher volumes and it'll make a much smoother process. A final note, while if you're doing a low pressure recovery, using the Appion and the Navic pumps do work. They absolutely work. You can do a recovery. You can also do a charging, and even though neither of those pumps are rated for it, so bear that in mind. These pumps are not rated for low pressure refrigerants. What I'm saying here is going outside of the boundaries a little bit. If you're in a situation where you just need to get something done, those pumps will get the job done. They're going to take a lot longer. So if you're getting into a lot of low pressure, then it is worth making some of those investments. Or if you can't make the investment into an industrial setup, then you can just hire somebody. So a lot of areas have refrigerant recovery services that people offer to come in and do recoveries on chillers just like yours. So I would definitely suggest that if you aren't comfortable with this and you don't have the right equipment, it's going to help you. It's going to help you a lot. And if this video was helpful to you, go check out chilleracademy.com. I've got a whole chiller community there where we can troubleshoot together. We can do some mentorship. We can go through the whole process, and us as a community can come together, discuss things, work together on situations, and be a really strong community. And to get access to that community, you just be enrolled in one of the courses. Everybody enrolled in a course at chilleracademy.com will get access to the chiller community itself and all of its benefits. And it's no extra charge to you once you're enrolled. With that, MTT, make the time for your family, for your spouse, for your kids. I appreciate you.